You know, all my books normally have my flight boarding passes. This is when I went to Salt Lake City. The was I doing in Salt Lake City? I actually had no idea. Today we're going to talk about a book called Practice Perfect. I think as a manager or trainer or coach, it's really important that you're constantly upping your game around how learning works. Today, one of the biggest challenges in our workforce is there are too many people in HR and training and development that don't have formal education and experience in how skill is developed. It's not a one-day SHRM workshop and then bam, you know it. Probably don't want a doctor doing a one-day workshop before they perform surgery on you. And it's the same thing that happens today, unfortunately, in so many organizations where you take the person that's been here the longest and bam, you make them your training manager. There's a lot more to it. So, Doug Lemov, pretty cool, author of the best-selling book, Teach Like a Champion, managing director at Uncommon Schools, now directs their projects on effective teaching process. So how are we doing this, Jaime? I'm going to read my biggest notes, so they don't have to.
Yes.
You know, shouldn't they read the book too?
You probably should.
This almost isn't fair. Here we go. How did practice get squeezed out of our lives is one of the things the book talks about. The enemies of practice are pride and fear and self-satisfaction. Quote from John Wooden said, "You haven't taught it until they have learned it." The author talks about a real reality in the workforce. The unfortunate norm is to bring new people into a company and expect them to perform regardless of the degree to which they have developed individual skills. In onboarding new employees, trainers rarely ask them to practice discrete skills in isolation. In the best scenarios, professionals go back and develop those skills as necessary. More often, though, they try to get by with compensation skills. You eventually hire others to mask their weaknesses, or you work around the skills they've never developed. When you begin practicing skills, here's an effective combination. First, you should practice skills in game-like scenarios. Second, you should apply the skill of matching the right techniques to the right moments. And third, you should put practice into the game environment. Any of you out there familiar with LMS? Well, here's a quote that'll make you rethink it. In a study from Cornell professors that were looking at the effectiveness of learning, the professors pointed out that in most classrooms, there's a, quote, architectural resistance. Most classrooms, more like 99.9% on campus, are auditoriums. They're built with just one purpose: focusing the attention of many on the professor. Maybe the single most important factor in determining its success is the speed at which you deliver feedback. John Wooden, I think we talked about him earlier, was notoriously obsessive about this. One of his former players wrote, "Coach believed correction was wasted unless it was done immediately." One of my favorite parts of the book is the author's discussion around the proper sequence that practice should follow. First is the actual practice exercise, might be the drill or the activity. Second, it's feedback. Third is a do-over. It's a repractice using feedback. Fourth, it's possibly do it multiple times, over and over and over again. And five is a reflection. This is different from the sequence that most people are naturally inclined to follow. They talk about something called the OK plateau, where when you practice deliberately, you eventually reach a performance plateau they call the OK plateau. And the key is to then practice failing to break through that. And because people would rather work on what's easy to work on than on what is psychologically difficult, you need to be prepared for the clever ways that people will find to, quote, work around the work. Practice should not be a punishment. When you invest the time and creativity to make practice fun, people will be motivated to participate, not only out of sheer enjoyment, but also because you're communicating an important message, saying, quote, "This is something positive that's worth your time." You heard that fun, Jaime? Fun's okay.
Yay.
You okay with fun? The more your team members enjoy doing something, the more they'll practice. The more they'll practice, the more they'll improve. What you do as a leader after practicing new skills can be just as important as the practice itself, as it helps the takeaways from practice to stick and ensures that practice translates into improved performance over time. In the education sector, we argue it is the fundamental obligation of organizations to make people better. The capacity to develop people and make them better is, you could argue, the best measure of an organization's work. Yet most organizations, including educational organizations, ironically fail to leverage some of the most basic, effective, and straightforward tools that could help them in the struggle. In part, perhaps because they appear so basic and straightforward. You know, one of the most powerful messages of the book, Practice Perfect, other than the techniques and the best practices, and there's definitely a ton of stuff you can take right away and put right into practice, is this theme of normalizing error. The best organizations that have built the muscle and the capacity to develop skill, which not many organizations are skill developing enterprises. Your organization creates an environment where skill development happens. Normalizing error is not a nice to have, it's a need to have, it's critical. Go pick up Practice Perfect. Now with that, back to work.